Aloha. Good afternoon. My name is Pamela Young, and I'm a broadcast journalist at KHON2 in Honolulu. It is a great honor to welcome you all back to the National ACE 2021 AAPI Strong Legislative Conference. On behalf of the National Asian Pacific Islander American Chamber of Commerce, also called National ACE, thank you for joining us on our third and final day. We are thrilled that you have taken the time to invest in our AAPI community. The conference will reveal how public policy, advocacy, procurement, and equitable access to resources will make us stronger together. The AAPI Strong Legislative Conference is a place for our unified voice to play an integral role in our economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as anti-Asian hate and violence. Our theme for this year is empowering AAPI businesses. We're always stronger when we work together. At this time, I would like to introduce Bill Imada, Chairman and Chief Connectivity Officer of IW Group and a co-founder and now board member of ACE, to do the welcoming remarks. IW Group is a minority-owned and operated advertising, marketing, and communications agency focusing on the growing multicultural markets. For more than 25 years, Bill has worked with some of the top domestic and global companies, including CVS Health, Janssen, Lexus, McDonald's, Walmart, Walt Disney, Warner Brothers, and Wells Fargo. Bill is an inspiring leader and an icon in the AAPI community. Please welcome Bill Imada.
Thank you, Pamela. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor to welcome you all to the final day of the National ACE 2021 AAPI Strong Legislative Conference. Today, you'll hear from entrepreneurs who have these incredible experiences to share with each and every one of you. We have a subject matter expert discussing the importance of digital transformation for small businesses, and you'll get a chance to meet some of our talented next-gen entrepreneurs. We also have a full program ahead, and we're really thrilled that you've taken the time to spend with all of us as we invest in our AAPI communities. As a small business owner, I can't tell you how important it is for all of us to lean in and be a part of this civic conversation. As we move out of COVID, we need to find a way to stay resilient and to keep hope alive. Now I want to take this opportunity to introduce you to one of our very first speakers, someone that I know well as a Californian. Her name is Isabella Casillas Guzman, and she is the new SBA administrator, and in just a short amount of time as the 27th administrator of the US SBA, she has done a remarkable job making the federal government and SBA accessible to all of you. She serves as a voice for America's 3 million small businesses and works on a number of innovative startups in President Biden's cabinet. Administrator Guzman grew up in a small business family, has been an entrepreneur herself. She spent her entire career advising entrepreneurs, launching ventures, helping small businesses scale up and navigate through the complexity of government. Most recently, she served as the director of California Office of Small Business Advocate, where she helped small businesses innovate, grow, and expand their businesses to new heights. In the world's 5th largest economic power, which is the state of California, she advanced fiercely the financial relief efforts for small businesses and focused on expanding assistance to entrepreneurs in underserved communities nationwide. In addition, she served as the Economic Recovery Support Function Coordinator for the state of California, where she spearheaded small business recovery efforts throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. Without further delay, I'd like to introduce you to an amazing person, SBA Administrator Isabella Casillas Guzman.
Thank you, Bill, for that warm introduction and for your strong leadership and support for our Asian American and Pacific Islander business communities and all of America's entrepreneurs. It's an honor to be back here with National ACE. Shiling Tong, I'm so always proud to join you in your leadership as well. I'm marking 6 months on the job as the voice for America's 30 million plus small businesses and innovative startups. And you all have been such an important partner since we last connected at your AAPI Heritage Summit, facilitating educational webinars for us on all of our programs, including Restaurant Revitalization Fund, ensuring we're serving our most impacted entrepreneurs in the AAPI community. So thank you, truly thank you for all of your help. With the COVID pandemic continuing to create uncertainty and negative impacts for our small businesses and our economy, we continue to rely on your strong and trusted connections to our entrepreneurs. The Delta variant is still limiting our recovery, particularly in communities with low vaccination rates. Yet despite this continued impact, we are creating jobs and building from the bottom up and the middle out. This is due in part to the fact that the American Rescue Plan gave us the economic and public health tools we needed to deal with challenges like Delta without going backwards or shutting down our economy. We always knew that coming back from a once-in-a-century pandemic would be a massive undertaking and that there would be challenges. But because of the Biden-Harris administration's leadership over the last 7.5 months, our recovery and return to full employment is much faster than predicted. More and more Americans are getting protected against the virus every day. And we have the strong economic and public health scaffolding we need to weather the storm. Today, our nation's nearly 2 million Asian-owned small businesses remain an economic powerhouse. However, we know that AAPI entrepreneurs have faced some of the greatest challenges and discrimination during this crisis and continue to struggle. So as SBA administrator, I'm committed to removing barriers and creating opportunity for all of our incredibly diverse communities across the nation. If we're going to build an equitable future economy, we need to open up access to capital, markets, and networks to increase startup and growth opportunities for all of our entrepreneurs. That priority is shared across the Biden-Harris administration. I'm excited to be here today and look forward to our discussion about the role the SBA can play to help ensure our nation's AAPI entrepreneurs are a critical part of our reimagined economy. So thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very, very much, Administrator Guzman from the Small Business Administration, for being with us for our first ever legislative summit. And I know, Administrator Guzman, you are from California. I'm from California. We are so proud that you're in this position. But we also know that you're the daughter of small business owners. And for a number of small businesses, specifically Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islanders, and other minority-owned small businesses, they have a difficult time accessing federal contracts. With that in mind, can you tell us what you and the SBA are doing to help increase access to federal contracts for minority-owned businesses?
This is such an important issue. I always say that access to capital is critical, and SBA's portfolio reflects that, but access to markets is equally as important. I know everyone would like a contract just as much as they need that loan, and so from our perspective, loans are helping businesses realize those contract and other market expansion opportunities. And President Biden has said that we need to provide both the temporary boost as well as the long-term boom to ensure small businesses are at the forefront of the reimagining of our economy. And the SBA definitely knows that contracting opportunities with the federal government is a big part of that equation. We're focused on building the long-term boom by ensuring that small businesses take advantage of the opportunities that will be available, such as through the bipartisan infrastructure deal. I know that that's a promise to invest $1.2 trillion in rebuilding our nation's infrastructure, and we want our small contractors at the forefront of those opportunities. The bill will be a game changer, providing those unprecedented investments that we've all heard about in infrastructure, as well as enhancing our global competitiveness. And so we want to make sure that the SBA is positioning our small businesses to get ready for that. As well, President Biden and Vice President Harris are so committed to supply chain resilience and made in America in manufacturing, and it'll place such a strong emphasis on our small contractors across all of these initiatives. which is why our SBA's contracting programs are positioning to better support small businesses with contract readiness, technical assistance, and with the capital that they need to engage in these opportunities. We want them to take advantage of that $500 billion federal contracting budget so that they can go out and build that wealth and create jobs and strengthen our supply chains to make us more competitive. And diversity is key for that. And in fiscal year 2020, America's entrepreneurs did $145.7 billion in business with the federal government, which is a $13 billion increase over the last fiscal year. This success added millions of jobs through our small businesses to the economy. So I know that these achievements have been great, but there's so much more work to do, and especially in ensuring equity. And so President Biden actually day one signed the executive order on advancing racial equity and support for underserved communities, which included instructions to all the federal agencies to make federal contracting procurement opportunities readily available to our diverse, underserved businesses broadly. And that includes, of course, our Asian American Pacific Islander community. And I hopefully you all tracked, but when the president was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, commemorating the centennial of the Tulsa Race Massacre, he did announce that we would be increasing the share of contracts awarded to the small disadvantaged businesses by 50% over 5 years. And so we're working really hard across all our programs to make sure that our businesses are positioned to build back better along with us for our economy's growth.
That's fantastic, Administrator. And I know that you are personally engaged in this activity yourself. And one of the things that you said is that you want to see businesses be resilient. And that really rings true with Asian American and Pacific Islander businesses. But as you know, this pandemic has really created a lot of challenges for small businesses all over the country, particularly in the restaurant and hospitality area. And so many of them have suffered greatly. And although they've taken advantage most recently of the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, that fund has been depleted. Do you think that there will be additional resources added to that fund that will be made available to Asian American, Pacific Islander, and other small businesses around the country?
Yes. No, I know it's been such a massive impact on our highly impacted hospitality industry. And we know oftentimes, travel and tourism or restaurants, they attract people to main streets or communities, and so really lift up those whole economies. And I saw, since I was in California, and I was actually based in Los Angeles, commuting to Sacramento as well. And so early on, we saw in LA County the backlash against Asian-owned restaurants. And so they've been hurting for even longer than even the closures. And so I know that that's such a critical issue. I think one of the stories that really stuck with me while we were implementing the Restaurant Revitalization Fund was an owner of a Korean barbecue restaurant in Oregon. Kim Jong Grillin was the name of the business, but he was sharing with us that he's able to really put his culture first through food, and that the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, that money received really was a game changer for him. And the fact that the SBA was there to help, it just meant so much to him, made him feel less alone. And I think that really hits us when we're implementing these programs and trying to make sure that they're accessible to everybody. So we were really proud to deliver that $28.6 billion to more than 101,000 restaurants and food and beverage businesses like the one in Oregon owned by Han. But we know that it wasn't enough. So we were swift and efficient with it, but the Restaurant Revitalization Fund demand was 2.5 times that amount, 72 billion worth of applications. So I know that ultimately Congress is considering that currently to decide whether they will invest the resources to meet that need. SBA has depleted those funds completely and so has no further authority. So we will have to track that in Congress along with you. But we are trying to position our programs to continue to support our small businesses that have been impacted. And that's, restaurants, hotels, gyms, across the board, all these industries. And we're pivoting to provide some critical lifelines. And we still have the COVID EIDL program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. Billions are still available, and it's low interest emergency working capital. And it's, basically long-term affordable debt for our small businesses. And I know that's different than a grant, but we are trying to position it and make improvements and streamline it so that it's working better for our small businesses who still need that support, because we are still facing the Delta variant. And I'm pleased that we recently announced that the COVID EIDL program will be increasing from $500,000 to $2 million for qualified applicants. And we've made the program more flexible by allowing its funds to be used to pay down business debt, because that's the problem. People have assumed so much debt to stay alive. And so this will be really critical because it will also have 24 months of deferment. So in addition to helping our smallest businesses, making sure they can access this crucial capital, we do want to make sure that those who are trying to get 500,000 and under could have priority. So we have a 1-month exclusive window to process and disperse funds to businesses requesting 500,000 or less. But all applications up to 2 million will be processed as they are submitted. So we are really excited about that program, and we want to just be here to continue to support our businesses, regardless of the amount of relief they were able to access, to position them for the future growth. And I know that SBA's field offices and resource partners across the board are positioned and ready to help.
By the way, under your leadership, Administrator Guzman, I see a lot more of the SBA people reaching out to businesses and saying, what can we do to help you? So I just wanted to let you know that that's happening. But I also want to talk to you a little bit about what's happening with COVID-19 and the resurgence of the Delta variant. And now we're talking about another variant. And so that has seriously impacted a lot of businesses, as you have just mentioned. But in addition to that, and I know you know this firsthand, being from California and being one of the advocates for small businesses in our state, that many immigrant businesses in particular, Asian American, Pacific Islander, but also the large number of Latino businesses and Black-owned businesses, they don't take access or they don't go to federal organizations like the SBA for a variety of reasons: language barriers, cultural barriers, fear of the government, or even this attitude that we can do this on our own without any help. With all of that in mind, what are you doing to address some of these challenges moving forward?
Yeah, I saw it firsthand in California, across my community, the Latino community, as growing up, but language and cultural barriers can limit the connections needed to access resources. And it's really the impetus behind the Community Navigator pilot program that the president was so proud of that he released during the American Rescue Plan, that will hopefully launch this fall, and establish a hub and spoke model of trusted networks of advisors to better connect our small businesses, especially the underserved, to resources. And we know that we have to build bridges again to government and not only create better designed products and better implementation and outreach, but also really be very very, very specific about what we need to do to support our businesses in these communities that might have those language barriers. And I know in-language services are really critical. So we, of course, rely on our network of resource partners and soon to be announced navigators. But the CARES Act also set aside funds for the SBA to ensure its resources and services were available in 10 common languages other than English. And we put that funding to work. That's why we've been able to translate many of our important applications into multiple languages, and we've also scaled up our customer service capacity, in fact, providing support in 17 languages. We know that our SBDC service centers do provide multi-languages. I recall in California, across our network, we had 27 languages supported at centers across the state. So we do hope that with authentic representation and authentic and culturally appropriate services through our networks, that we can better serve these communities and get them to trust us as an option to help them grow their business or start their business.
I want to just say that calling it navigators is brilliant, because a lot of times people need that navigation to help them understand how to get through the federal government and through these agencies, and having a navigator help is a great step. But I also know, Administrator Guzman, that you and the president are very big on reaching out and creating these very unique partnerships. What can the private sector do to be a part of your work to help improve technical assistance, the great work that's already being done by the SBA?
Yeah, I mean, I think I always say that SBA has one of the greatest and longest standing public-private partnerships because our lending program, our network distribution channels are the private sector lenders and mission-focused lenders that we work with across our programs. Same with our resource partners. There's great institutions, universities, local nonprofits that we work with, and we want to continue to build on those partnerships. Through COVID idle, of course, there's been a laser focus on small businesses and the impact that they've had. I mean, we've scaled at the SBA from $40 billion to over $1 trillion served through these networks of over 5,000 lending partners. So I think that makes us a stronger agency. So I would definitely intend on expanding and strengthening those relationships to continue to support businesses through whatever channels are most appropriate to reach them. And it's why, like on the Restaurant Revitalization Fund program, we added those point of sale vendors so that we can reach businesses through new ways, new partnerships. We need to transform all of our programs and approaches, our processes and our systems to ensure that we can meet our small businesses where they are. That's what I tell my team all the day. And today, meeting them where they are is so different, of course, post-COVID in terms of their financial health and their marketplace that they're trying to survive in. And we're trying to be as entrepreneurial as the entrepreneurs we serve and meet small businesses where they are, again. And so that means through private partners. So I think that across our programs, whether it's very specifically through the Navigator program, where we are going to partner externally with private partners, or in finding corporate and philanthropic organizations that want to help us amplify the resources for small businesses. And, of course, through National ACE, we want to continue to try to leverage those authentic relationships or those strong connections to reach our businesses. So I've asked my team to be customer first, technology forward, and equitable in everything we do. And I think that's how we're going to connect with the private sector and connect with more of our businesses.
This really is the last question because we know how valuable your time is, but we know that this infrastructure bill is pending, and we know that the president and you have really reached out to make sure that we pass this infrastructure bill. Is there anything that we might be able to do as an organization to build bridges, to talk about the importance of this infrastructure bill and how we might be able to expose the opportunities that exist from the passage and the enactment of this particular bill, these bills?
Yeah, I mean, I think that SBA has really been focused on trying to help small businesses on the disaster front, right? Weathering these storms, we are, with our Office of Disaster Assistance on the ground behind FEMA, supporting small businesses. And, I think we're so pleased that the infrastructure bill is making these critical investments in climate to make sure that we wreak less havoc on our Main Street businesses that are so affected and oftentimes don't come back from the natural disasters of those impacts. For as much damage as COVID has done to America's small businesses, the damage from the climate crisis is just getting started. So I am really hopeful with this bipartisan infrastructure deal that the president's plans for climate resilience and clean energy, which are major priorities in this bill, would really enact some great opportunities for small businesses as well. I mean, small businesses are innovators. They're the contractors that literally can build those bridges. And we want to see that those small businesses are able to leverage those opportunities. We are working closely with partners across the federal government. President Biden, as a strong leader, always approaches things from a whole of government approach and looking to transform our systems and create opportunities for all of our small businesses in the process. And so there are a couple of things that we're doing to try to really laser focus in on the infrastructure deal, the global competitiveness, our supply chain resilience, and we're establishing a new manufacturing and supply chain hub within our government contracting and business development office. That will laser focus on trying to make sure that small businesses or underserved businesses especially can become a key driving force in really expanding America's industrial base, because they're a key part of it, but also in leading to fulfill the implementation of this bill, if one's completed it, for the global competitiveness of our country. President Biden's Made in America, Make It in America manufacturing standards will also be a huge boost to small manufacturers, and rebuilding our nation's roads and bridges and ports will create lots of new opportunities for small businesses and contracting or through partnerships as subcontractors as well. So I know that there's also opportunities around clean energy infrastructure and innovation that we see small businesses playing a key role in, whether it's maintaining new solar, wind, geothermal, and other clean energy systems all across the nation. And as you know so well, California is so dominant in this space. The SBA wants to be there to help small businesses identify those opportunities, pursue them, and deliver against them with the capital that they need from day one until the job is done. And we know that we can do this better when we create partnerships as well to make sure that our businesses are aware of these opportunities. We've seen a decline in the number of small businesses participating in the federal marketplace over the last 10 years. We've also seen a decline in new entrants every year. And so we just need to make sure that we're reaching out to the AIP community as well as others to connect to opportunities through navigators or through the SBA offices directly. I think we have a great opportunity to develop in partnership and create a real lasting effect from the infrastructure bill.
First of all, Administrator Guzman, we want to say how proud we are that you are our 27th administrator. And we so greatly appreciate your time today, because we know you have a responsibility for 30 million businesses, including the more than 2 million Asian American and Pacific Islander businesses. So we want to say thank you to you, but we also want to be your partner, be a part of the SBA, because our population grew by double digits in 49 out of 50 states. And we believe we have a role to play to help the administration create these new opportunities for businesses, but also focus on some of the key things that you just mentioned, such as climate change and what we can do to get people to create these new infrastructures around wind and solar and alternative energy sources. So thank you so much for your time. And we look forward to speaking to you again in the near future.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I'm really committed to your mission and look forward to the partnership.
Stay tuned for a special panel conversation on digital transformation.
Please welcome ACE Next Gen co-founder Ian So and National Chair Ms. Angela Chang.
Thank you for joining ACE Next Gen's Fireside Chat with Stephen Chen, co-founder of YouTube, and Andrew Chau, co-founder of Boba Guys, and one of the founding members of ACE Next Gen. My name is Ian So. I am the co-founder of ACE Next Gen. We were founded in 2016 as a branch of National ACEs to support millennial AAPI entrepreneurs. Since then, we have grown to 5 chapters, an annual conference, retreat, and virtual programming that connects and educates thousands of AAPI entrepreneurs a year. Here's a video to show a little bit more about what we do. Next up, we have a message from the ACE Next Gen chairwoman, Angela Chang.
Hi, I'm Angela Chang, the National Chair of ACE Next Gen and Chief Strategy Officer at KCAL Insurance Agency. We're so excited to have you join us for the inaugural AAPISTRONG Legislative Conference, and especially for this fireside chat. Entrepreneurship can be a lonely road, but it doesn't need to be. ACE Next Gen was first founded in Boston to provide the AAPI millennial entrepreneur community a place to share learnings and increase collaboration. Our members share the same core values. They're generous, humble, authentic, community-oriented, and have the growth mindset. On the podcast, How I Built This, host Guy Ross asks every guest whether their success is built on skill or luck. I've learned since joining ACE Next Gen that another factor weighs heavily on one's success in business and life. That is, of having a trusted support network. ACE Next Gen provides me and many others with that support community. ACE Next Gen's Inner Circles program introduced me to a group of entrepreneurs who I now talk to on a near daily basis. Through my chats with them, I feel seen, heard, and understood. We're constantly swapping ideas and experiences, and our deep dive conversations have generated so much of what I've implemented within my own company. I hope that you too will find a circle of peer advisors who can help you on your entrepreneurial journey, maybe some who you might meet through today's virtual event. And I look forward to the day we can all get together again and swap ideas in person. Back to you, Ian.
And with that, I would like to introduce our fireside chat panel with Andrew Chau and Stephen Chen.
Awesome. Welcome. Thank you, Ian, for tossing it over, and thank you for everything that you do at ACE Next Gen. Today, we're super excited to have, like a big brother of mine, Steve Chen, founder of a little company, just a little company called YouTube that you might know. What's up, Steve?
Thank you, Andrew. I'm excited to be here.
I know we're on this other technology platform, but you pretty much are one of the people responsible for this type of online experience. So I'm going to ask you some of that, but really talk a little bit about your life as an entrepreneur. I will say the goal of this chat is to make sure that the community feels inspired, that they have somebody to look up to. I have been saying that you're pretty much like, it wasn't for you, a movie like Shang-Chi wouldn't even exist because someone like Simu Liu started on Netflix, but also on YouTube. And that's the platform you gave. So you're responsible for our latest superhero. I just want to say that. So you are a real superhero.
And I think that it's, as we start getting into it later, I think talking a little bit about the very early weeks, months of starting YouTube. Of course, it's grown much more in the sort of 15, 16 years that it's been out. But I think that's the interesting part. I think as many of people with ideas in their heads, potential entrepreneurs, as they start thinking about, what's the next step that I should take? And I think that's the critical part back in the early days of getting on a flight to get to Silicon Valley, whether it was joining PayPal, starting YouTube, quitting eBay, quitting PayPal. I think those are the key points. And I think those are the real differences between, continuing to work for a long period versus starting something on your own. So I'd love to actually talk about that aspect and also a little bit about next steps of what I'm doing.
Let's start with your origin story, your superhero origin story. How did you really get started? And then I don't know if there's any part of your Asian American identity that also played into that when you started, from both tech and then starting your own tech company.
I was born outside of the U.S. I was born in Taiwan, and I was here until finished up second grade. I think I was in day 2 of third grade when I boarded that flight to Chicago, where I spent elementary school, junior high school, and college. And that was just, I think a lot of it has to do with also I grew up at the same time that the internet really started growing up. And so during that period, about early 90s, when I first received my first computer and started programming, this was all back in Chicago at the time. And just being able to have the flexibility of just hacking away on Sundays, on Saturdays, at whatever it is that pops in your head. And I was part of the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana group, that same group that created originally Max Levchin from PayPal, that went from Illinois and then landed in San Francisco Airport. You have the guys that started much of the Yelp guys, the PayPal guys. Mark Andreessen was the one that really led that whole group from Netscape onto Silicon Valley. And so back then that was probably the big first step for me. was whether or not you would follow the conventional route at the time, which is Department of CS was a good school to go to in Champaign-Urbana, but the idea was you would graduate and return back to Chicago where you grew up and start your family there. But then there was the view starting from Mark and Dreesen that showed that there's another path that you could take if you're willing to buy a one-way ticket to Silicon Valley and just start something completely on your own, really, without an address, without knowing where you're going to be living for the next 6 months, without knowing what it is that you're really going to start with the 80% potential that you're going to be needing to find another job in a few months. But the excitement of it all, especially in your early 20s when you still have that opportunity to be able to do something. Mark led that train. And then as I started coming out in 1999, which was when I got on that plane to Silicon Valley to join PayPal at the time, nobody agreed with that decision. It was very much an isolated decision that I made on my own. And I think some of the challenges was just making sure that there wasn't even agreement, I think, from my parents or the family. It was more just notification and then just doing it. I think that was probably one of the biggest decisions that I made, and one that was a very big turning point, as to say, that wasn't what I was expecting to do, but getting onto a flight and then joining PayPal started the way for the next 20 years of where I was in Silicon Valley.
Let me ask you a little bit about the Asian American identity, since we have a lot of the audience that identify as Asian American or API. It's the fastest growing ethnic group in the US. That's projected to be about 46 million by 2060. And we're going to be the largest immigrant group. And we're going to be about over 20, almost 30% of all immigrants. So what do you think is the future of the API community? What can you do as people are watching right now, people look up to you and what you've created? Did you have those people that you looked up to when you were young? And then what do you think the future is for the whole community?
I think it's interesting bringing it more on a personal level. I have my own kids now, right there. And overnight, it seems like they've gotten to be 9 years old, 11 years old. And I still remember the early days when the older son, Jaden, picked up an iPad and he was able to type in his own password. But I was so happy to see the app that he launched was YouTube. I think he was I don't think he could actually pronounce the name YouTube at the time. And I recall he was just astonished. Not that when I told him I created YouTube, what he thought was I was the actor and actress and the director in every video on YouTube. I don't think he got this idea that there are the entrepreneurs that create the back end of the service, and then there's the actual content creators that's on YouTube. And so the follow-up question a second later was, wow, Daddy, how did you act in so many of these videos? But now, they're entering school. That's school just started and they're in 6th grade already. And I think part of it is it's reaching a period in which I need to be telling them, I need to be making some parental decisions myself as to what is the right way to be raising these kids. And I think there's definitely a goal in the end goal in sight, but I know that there's so many, just through my own personal records, personal history, there's a lot of turns that you can take that you may not have expected 10 years ago, 15 years ago in your life, with many of the decisions that I made that led me to where I am today. And so I think it's a balance between setting some of the guidelines, but making sure that there's enough room for them to be able to continue to explore. Many of the key decisions that I made, that the big ones, not the small ones, but the big ones about at the time when I left PayPal eBay 5-6 years after I was there in Silicon Valley in 2005, and threw away a pretty comfortable job there and saying, I'm going to put that all aside and I'm going to throw that all into paying the high bandwidth costs, the high server costs, the storage costs of starting a video service. At the time, before 2005, attempts had been made to create something like YouTube, but people couldn't afford it. Just internet cost scalability was just not affordable back then. So it wasn't even so much, the idea was part of it, but a large part of it was just the engineering of being able to do it in an affordable manner to scale it out. Not just, we talked about moving to Silicon Valley as a decision that surprised and maybe wasn't agreed upon with my parents, but so was leaving a comfortable job at eBay and PayPal and starting YouTube. And there were many other things like this where it was part of just my personalities. I think a bit of, I'd love to be able to, if there's something in my head and there's commitment, I'd love to be able to, if it doesn't work, I want to experience myself and why it doesn't work. And so rather than taking taking the advice from, say, my parents. I'd love to actually try it and see if there's a way that I can do things differently. But I bring this up only because now I'm on the other side, and there are these moments, these scenarios in which it's a difficult decision, right? As to how much room do you let these kids have as they start growing? And some of it's, I left school when there were 6 months left before actually attaining my bachelor's degree. And there was some calculation in my head. This was the last semester of my senior year. And there was some calculation as to say, PayPal is not going to be around forever. And this was going to be an opportunity that will exist probably for a period of time, a segment of period of time. And if I don't take it now, it will unlikely still be present 6 months from now, a year from now. And so I'm going to get on this flight. I'm going to go try this. But if it doesn't work out, there's the opportunity to still come back and finish whatever is left of the degree. So it wasn't completely buying a ticket without thinking about all the other ramifications. But at the same time, I'm going to throw things around and say, if my kids were in that situation, I think I would have the same reaction as my parents, which is, why don't you finish your degree first? You've got 6 months left before you get on this flight to join. At the time, PayPal was a Palm Pilot security app. It wasn't even close to being this payment service that we know PayPal as now. And so, a lot of that, I would say, is different if I push the clock forward by 15, 20 years and looking back to see the decisions that I made in my 20s with the eyes of a 40-year-old father. It's hard to sometimes say the answer, especially a 20-year-old asking this question, is just follow exactly the path that I took, because I know that I wouldn't trust my kids to be taking that same route.
What I'm hearing is the future is endless. Its options are about in abundance. I think growing up in our generation, I do think there was a little bit, I wouldn't say narrower. Things looked riskier. Now there's so many options. I actually think the future is wide open. I think that's what you're saying. Like, your son can do anything. He can now be a superhero. He could be a famous athlete. He could obviously be like his dad and be one of famous entrepreneur. He could start a boba shop. Hopefully not a rival, to not fund him, but to start another food business. There's a lot of these ideas. And I think the biggest difference in the last 20 years, because I don't think there's as many Asian American dreamers personally. There's way more dreamers now, I feel like, aspiring.
A good point there. I would say there's stories out there, books out there written about the group that started PayPal. And many of them have gone off to start companies after they've left PayPal. So you have David Sachs, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, you have Yelp, YouTube, many of these companies that have been started from the original group that started PayPal. And I would say that with the co-founders of YouTube, Chad Hurley, who I met at PayPal, was the designer, it would have been, even if we had the idea in our heads, I think the 4 or 5 years that we spent together collaborating and building something, and it was always an uphill battle facing there was a dot-com crash that sort of a few months after I joined PayPal. Sure. And then all of the fundraising that was pretty much, it was so easy to be getting funding. All of a sudden that all disappeared. Those opportunities became very difficult to get. And I think having gone through that ourselves and being bundled with this group that was actually changing and transforming this financial business payment services in a way. But I think being on the inside of it and knowing that every day you're going to be facing hurdles, facing challenges, I think that's the training that ultimately gave us the courage to be able to say, all right, why don't we try to do something in the video service? It's not something that we've done before, but similar to the fact that we've never done a payment service before, I think a lot of it is the idea and the courage to be able to take that first step. I mean, I think that's a little bit abstracted from specifically what you're going to be working on, what businesses you're going to be starting. But I think that first step is ultimately the most important key decision that you need to be able to make.
I read about the Denny story a long time ago, right? There's this idea. What I heard was you couldn't meet anywhere, and you had hit around in a Denny's to pitch YouTube to possibly potential suitors for YouTube. Now, number one, is that true? Because I read rumors on some articles, but I couldn't confirm. And the second part is, do you use other small businesses in the same way? There's like a coffee shop that you do this at, and there's a favorite restaurant where you've done that. And tell us some of those stories, because I think I love to connect small businesses with a little bit of or businesses in general with tech? Because these are two different worlds colliding.
It's a true story. I think and it's pretty understandable. I think the circumstances behind it, usually you would have these conferences, you'd have an important meeting, mergers, acquisitions, a meeting in a more formal place, not Denny's. The reason for it was because for some strategic reasons, we didn't want it to be widely publicized that we were even considering this route of acquisition. But during that compressed period of less than a week's time, it didn't first start with, and you'd have to rewind the clock a bit. This is 2005. So at this time, Yahoo was actually doing much, much better than Google at the time. And so it actually made a lot more sense for us. We internally agreed to sell to Yahoo if we were only looking for, and this is again, putting on that 2005 hat, that we were only looking for the most amount of future growth potential for YouTube. We were looking for the highest acquisition cost. At that time, it made more sense in 2005, 2006 to actually sell to Yahoo. But we wanted to have this conversation and not be on the campuses of Yahoo and not be in the offices of YouTube, because just in Silicon Valley, I think the figures, they would be recognizable figures. And so so we thought, okay, this was a quick decision made over a phone call, but if you're going to try to find a place that you probably wouldn't recognize the Jerry Yangs and you wouldn't recognize the folks, the CEOs, the Larry and Sergey from Google, probably Denny's would be the place to do it. And it's 24 hours. We could go at any point. The initial meeting was with Yahoo, and it was at the Denny's there in Woodside in California, sort of smack dab in the middle of Silicon Valley, but still we were able to get a seat, and we talked briefly there. But I think the interesting thing there was all the meetings that we had about the mergers and acquisitions. So we had met with Yahoo, and then 2 days later, it was our proposal to the Google team about where should we have this meeting. We said, why don't we meet at the same Denny's at the same table? And so we ended up holding 3 of probably the most important meetings for YouTube up to that point at the same dining table at Denny's in Woodside. And ultimately, there was a very quick meeting that we needed to make. We didn't want it to be widely known that we were having any of these meetings, not with Yahoo, not with Google. But as soon as we were able to make that decision to move forward with Google at the time, which was, again, as I said, it was probably riskier for us to have gone with Google than Yahoo at that period. But the fit was it just made a lot more sense, and especially putting into consideration what the rest of the team was thinking, what the rest of the team it was still very early on with YouTube, and they wanted to stay for much longer to see just the growth of YouTube continue. What the offer from the Google side was just a lot friendlier in terms of letting us continue to grow on the same trajectory that we had set. But all of this is a $1.65 billion deal set over.
I think that's inspiring too, just to hear a little bit of the DNA of how a deal gets made. All right, so let me ask you a little bit about Asian culture. I know you're really closely tied to Taiwan, and in general, you supported the Asian Art Museum, which few people know how big you were, and you and your wife Jamie involved in that. So, how does the AAPI culture affect the way you make decisions? How important is it? Has it affected the way you lead and run things, and where you put your resources?
Absolutely. And I think that it was really, I think in the last year when many of us actually started speaking out about our personal stories about what it was like to grow up as an Asian American in different parts of the US. And I think the details were different about, it's obviously different to be growing up in Chicago versus the East Coast versus Bay Area, LA, so on. But I think during this period was also when I started meeting and connecting with many other Asian Americans who I've actually known for long periods of time, but I've never rewound the clock to what it was like when they were growing up. And to my surprise, many of the stories were similar and the same, and the experiences were similar, even though it was completely different periods, different backgrounds, and just completely different neighborhoods. I wouldn't think that somebody from, Virginia would be going through the same things. I thought, again, that what I was going through in my growing up periods in the suburbs of Chicago was unique to me. And so it was a surprise from last year. It was the first time there was this window opening experience. And so one thing that I would love to do is to be able to encourage more of this communication. I think that some of these matters are not things that you would openly bring up the first time that you meet somebody, but I think these are important things to be actually highlighting as you start to try to cohesively bring together a group for kind of behind one single cause. And again, I think one of the things that I see a lot is after becoming a father and actually having kids, and the questions were also, how would you want your own kids to be raised? If I were to go back to Chicago, would I want them to have the mirrored growing up experience that I did? And I would openly say that this isn't unique to me, but not every single day was a pleasant day. And I think part of that certainly has some attributes of being an Asian American, as the only Asian American we were in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. So it was about 45 minutes outside of downtown Chicago. And we were the only Asian American family that was growing up there. And I think that there's definitely, pros and cons to that. But I think oftentimes when we talk about our sort of stories and life stories, we're talking about the positive side. It was only last year when things started surfacing about there are also challenges and hurdles that you have to come across growing up as the only Asian American family in an entire neighborhood, in the entire school. And so now that I have my own kids, it's also thinking the same about what do you tell them? What do you give them in terms of the advice that you give them and the sort of encouragement that you give them? Part of me, the reason that I'm passionate about wanting to play, I think, a vocal voice in this matter is that I do think that it's not unique if you're facing some of these challenges. I face them as well as many people that I've talked to that you see in the press that have ended up in sort of different versions of success in various sectors and various verticals. But many of us actually share some of the common stories from what it was like to be growing up. And I think that it's important to be able to get that out there, that this is not unique to face these challenges and face these hurdles. But one of the things is as you overcome them, as you get over them, there's lessons learned from all of them. And I think that those lessons then get reapplied to whatever it is that you end up doing 10, 15, 20 years later.
Do you have a little bit of practical, if what entrepreneurs listening right now, what would you say to them as your number 1 or 2 pro tip? What would you say to them right now?
The recipe that I've seen followed in these startups that I've played multiple roles in, being first an individual contributing engineer on a much larger project. There, it's more about handing down the actual tasks that you need to do, but then accomplish them. It's very different as a engineer for a 10-person startup versus an engineer for a 2,000-person company. And I thought that was a great hands-on experience that I would love I think it was important for me, of many lessons learned from those days at PayPal, to actually have joined PayPal at a point in which it was still under 10 engineers. And then having gone through all those challenges of, first going in there for the first 6 months, it was so easy to get fundraising. And all of a sudden, .com crashed. 80-90% of the companies around us started crashing, and they started needing to find ways to be able to just survive, right? To be able to monetize. And then I think growing up there was the challenges with eBay. There was the going public by itself, the acquisition, and the post-acquisition with eBay and PayPal, what that was like to integrate completely 2 different cultures. In a way, that was kind of repeated with what happened with YouTube and ultimately the acquisition by Google, and what happened with post-acquisition, most importantly, is how do you actually integrate YouTube into a much larger service like Google at the time. And I want to say that I think that there was a lot of things that we learned during those periods with the PayPal eBay periods that was played as we saw how we were going to integrate with Google and YouTube. But I think one of the most important things is, I think many people would measure define the positive success of a startup being just the end value of how much this acquisition goes for, or how much you can take this company public for. What is your, exit amount from this? But I think that there's something to be said about, even if at the end of the 4 years that you're working on this, or 2 or 3 years that you're working on this company, there's a unique experience in taking an idea that you just have in your head and actually putting work, effort, energy, and being able to see this result in something tangible. And I think it's just a life experience that, regardless of how successful that end valuation of this idea is, it's the journey along the way that's a unique experience that I think that just about everyone that ever has an idea, they should take it. I think that having an idea in your head, it would be the route that I wouldn't want to take when you're at 59 and a half and ready to collect your 401k, and being able to think that I wish that idea that I had 35 years ago, 40 years ago, I actually did something to it. I think so many people, one of the most common questions that I would actually get from a lot of these conferences is actually just, I have an idea in my head. What do you think the next step is? And I think they themselves know the next step is to start something, but it does mean a lot. It does mean you may have to quit your job now. It actually means that you have to go the unconventional route. It must mean that maybe it's not something that's supported by everybody along the way. But I think that it's a unique experience, and I would really push for people to give that a shot.
I know we got to wrap up soon. Tell me a little bit about what you're working on now. What happens in this life? And you talk about your kids a lot. What else have you been on your mind, whether it's for the Asian community, business community, entrepreneurship community? What do you have to say for them?
Yeah. Well, so I spent exactly 20 years there in Silicon Valley. Right now, I actually moved to Taiwan, where I was born a couple of years ago. And this is before all of COVID hit. We were doing some remodeling of our house in California. And just with the kids, I think trying to mirror a little bit about what I had gone through, where in Asia before moving to the US, little bits here and there about memories of what those 8 years were like. But I think certain things do come through, and whether or not it's conscious or subconscious, I think they do play a role in everyday decision making that I do ever since then. And I wanted to expose my own kids to, as Asian Americans, I just wish that they spent a year in Asia to be able to really grasp the culture of it. As much as San Francisco Chinatown is a great place to be, I think that it's not a fair mirror of what you actually get being on the ground in Asia. And it wasn't something that any of us really fully expected to know, like what it was going to be like. It was just a pain to start a bank account, trying to using Google Translate to figure out how to actually sign a 2-year lease on apartments. But we weren't out here for that long. We came out here in 2019. It was after 20 years in Silicon Valley. We're going through joining a company that was already started, PayPal, starting, of course, YouTube, going through the acquisitions, going through what it was like after Google for 4 or 5 years, after the acquisition of continuing to stabilize, grow the company, doing everything from angel investing to VCs to then advising other startups. But I think after 20 years, I myself was ready for trying something else. And this is in 2019. We said, why don't we pick up our bags, and instead of just keeping everything as is, keeping the kids in the same school and just renting a house in the same neighborhood, let's take the more startup route. Let's take the more adventurous route. Let's hop on a plane and then let's go live in Asia for a year or two. They get the exposure, they get maybe learning some of the language. But I think that the key thing was really driven by wanting the kids to get a mirror experience of what I had as a kid, because I thought that was truly important to me as I started my own career. And the idea was to get them to come out here to Asia for 2 years. Now this is 2.5 years, where it's still just like a startup environment. We don't really have a clear finish line in mind as to what's going to be happening in a year or 2 years. But so far, I think it's been a very valuable experience for the kids. It's a very different culture and a very different environment. And I think that they'll always look upon these couple years spent in Asia in future developments of their life as they make some of the key decisions that they make. It just gives them a more wider perspective of what the entire world is like. But ultimately, even the kids are asking, when are we going to get on that flight back to America? So I think the idea is settling back in the US, but taking the experiences from what it was like here in Asia. And then aside from the kids, I'm interested in doing, I think the opportunities in Silicon Valley are still the most vast when it comes to starting companies. It's just the culture there is already all fit for finding venture capital, for finding investors, for finding collaborators, for finding co-founders. But in a way, it's a new challenge that I've never faced before, which is how do you actually create potentially a global company from outside of Silicon Valley Valley. And to me, that's exciting in that it's almost a startup, a new startup, in that you're encountering challenges that you just don't have to face when you're starting a company in Silicon Valley. So I'm having fun doing that out here.
I want to thank you for your time, man. I really miss you on behalf of entrepreneurs and small business owners and people who just are dreamers in America and across the world. You're such a living legend and an example to so many. So thanks for your time, man.
Thanks for the time. Thank you so much.
Here's special remarks from Congresswoman Michelle Steele. Please welcome Joon Kim, Executive Director of External Affairs at Comcast Corporation.
Welcome, everyone, to National ACE's AAPI Strong conversation on digital transformation. We're joined today by Jason Chan from AT&T, Angela Pinsky from Google, and Paul Disselcombe from PayPal. I'll be the moderator today. My name is Joon Kim, and I am with Comcast. So to start off, because I actually needed to look up and I Googled what digital transformation was, I just wanted to throw out to the panelists here how each of them would define digital transformation, whether from a personal perspective or based on what their company considers digital transformation. So why don't we just start off with Jason?
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I think digital transformation is the act of investing in people, investing in technology, investing in systems and processes to upgrade how businesses, people, and communities live and work. Digital economy that we're in, right? The world continues to feel the effects of this global pandemic, in which I think digital technologies were relied upon to keep everything running. Technologies like e-commerce, video conferencing, like what we're doing here today, cloud-based collaboration tools, really aided the transition to remote work. It enabled schools to continue teaching and allowed businesses to continue selling, even as in-person interactions were reduced. And in some cases, it ceased entirely. And I think we're sitting on the cusp of an economic revolution, one built on the possibilities of these digital technologies and their incredible prevalence during this time. I think we're in a position to make the most of this new economic position. I think if we seize the opportunity, we can help to ensure that any benefits are both fully realized and hopefully equally distributed.
Just want to, again, reiterate what Jason said. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I'm really excited for the conversation today. And I think that Jason really hit on it. Digital transformation is just the incorporation of digital tools into your daily life. Everything from big picture, like developing your own online e-commerce store or website, to smaller things like adopting QR codes into your contactless payments at your local convenience store. And while digital transformations were already taking place, the pandemic really accelerated that digital wave of change. And there are some estimates that it accelerated the trends by a good 3 to 5 years. And a lot of these changes will be permanent. The vast majority of consumers say that post-pandemic, they'll continue to shop online at elevated levels and use some of that convenience that they've seen come from the adoption of digital tools. I think that the other real opportunity with digital transformation is the opportunity for equity. I think that digital tools really have the opportunity to really level the playing field and allow for everyone to achieve that potential and really be able to grow their business or improve their life through the use of financial technology, in the case of PayPal, to really accelerate their financial health.
Yeah, I will agree with my colleagues here. I think that the adaptation to digital tools has been a really critical part of the pandemic, and the digital transformation, becoming a digital adaptation, has really accelerated, I think, a lot of people's comfort level with technology as part of improving their operations, their communications, and their connections with other people, whether it be for business or for personal. I think what we learned through this process is that there are people with a wide variety of comfort with that transformation and that adaptation. And for people who are very comfortable, I think that they picked it up quite quickly, as with anything else. But the people who are uncomfortable with it, they really do need to be met where they are in order to take them from a place where they're not using these digital tools that are readily available to a place where they feel comfortable using them, whatever their business or their use for that technology is.
Thank you. And all three of you mentioned COVID-19 and the fact that small businesses had to quickly adapt. And I've noticed that as well, being stuck at home basically for the last 18 months, like the rest of us. Like restaurants in my neighborhood quickly set up websites. They figured out the online ordering system. You have multiple delivery options, right? You can have someone come drop stuff off for you. There's contactless pickup at the small mom and pop Greek restaurant across the street. Which of those aspects do you think that were brought about by the pandemic will actually remain in place, whether it's on the payment side, whether it's the continued use of the technology for businesses that never even thought that they would have to do any of these things?
I think that there's what we've seen here during COVID is that technology and the digital communication systems will never fully replace human contact, but that was never the intent, right? The goal was to use these technologies where it is helpful and where it can make life, business, transactions, communications easier. And during a difficult time like COVID, where those communications are quite difficult and quite restricted, that technology is really critical for bridging those gaps. And I think what has become permanent is that the people who have used these tools during this time will have that comfort going forward and will start to integrate these tools, whether or not we are in this restricted time period going forward. And I think that it will help a lot of people because, as we all know, these tools and these digital skills are part of our future economy, and they're increasingly part of the skills necessary in order for businesses to adapt and for people to find employment and to communicate with each other. This acceleration in a lot of ways, I think, will enhance people's ability going forward, even though it was a tough way to learn those lessons.
I'll just add, I think that the longer this pandemic goes on, the more entrenched and habitual these seemingly small changes are going to become for all of us, for consumers and businesses. I think, and I know Angela kind of talked about it earlier, I think digital literacy is like really important, right? Digital inclusion is one element, and there are pockets of this country where there's like a tech desert. They don't have internet. But making sure that people, businesses, consumers understand the technology, one, but also understand how to implement and execute and actually use it to their day-to-day. I think that's really important. I think that fortunately for us, I think the digital solution industry is really competitive and innovative as a result of that. I know AT&T, we know the right technology can help streamline, it can help simplify and speed up some of these daily tasks, all while keeping small business owners really connected to their customers.
Yeah, I think that convenience of online shopping and using a QR code to check out in just a matter of seconds, that sort of convenience and swiftness in those transactions is something that will likely stay, as Jason mentioned, as habits change. And we see the toughest part of the digital transformation being that initial onboarding. Once a consumer or a small business owner is onboarded and they start using these tools and see how easy they are, then that really becomes, we see that stickiness with the use of those tools. So, one of the largest segments of digital users that we saw grow during the pandemic was the 50 plus demographic, what we've seen in the news called silver tech. I know that my parents, who are in their 70s, I finally got them to start using PayPal a lot more during the pandemic. I think that we're going to see some of those demographics start to use those digital tools more often as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess my follow-up question to that, because the term equity or digital equity has been mentioned, I know that here at Comcast, we are really focused in on that. And we're a combination of the digital equity, digital literacy, like Jason mentioned, and also trying to help small businesses through programs that we have like Comcast Rise, where we give tech and marketing advice and makeovers to small businesses. And then we're also doing grants. Are there similar programs at each one of your companies where you're focused in on that amalgamation of digital equity, digital inclusion, and helping people with that transformation?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. Last year, PayPal made a $535 million commitment to racial equity and trying to address some of the systemic issues that are in place that are preventing minorities from fully participating in the financial system and therefore trying to address the racial wealth gap that exists in the country. So we have a number of different programs that we've implemented through that commitment aimed at the BIPOC community, both for consumers and for small businesses. For small businesses in particular, we set up a grant program that made direct grants to small business owners. We also made direct grants to local nonprofits that were focused on the actual on the ground to support small businesses and set them up with that digital transformation and help them with those digital tools. And then we are working on a number of other educational opportunities, internship opportunities within our own group, and then also investments in minority-owned financial institutions to then feed that back into the community as well.
From Google's perspective, I think that it sounds similar to what you guys were also experiencing, was that the assistance was necessary in lots of different pockets. And so the SMB community in particular had a lot of needs from COVID. One was access to financing. Google had done a $170 million commitment to CDFIs in order to increase lending and financing to hard to finance businesses. We also tried to reach out to small businesses to help them adapt to this digital transformation. And that was done through a variety of means. One was through our Grow with Google campaign, which tries to reach out to vets and educators, job seekers, and small businesses and give them the digital tools. And a lot of those were in-person events where we would hold classes, but we moved that online to Grow with Google On Air, where you can learn classes and get access to those videos as you wanted to access them and when you were available. And we continued those trainings, and we saw over 1 million businesses access some of these digital skills trainings. We see hundreds of thousands of people looking at these videos. So I think that there was a real acknowledgement from the small business community that these skills are essential for at least the COVID and for the future. But again, I think it was really important to figure out how to communicate these digital skills to them in a way that they felt comfortable. So offering it in a variety of ways. And in particular, I think using the local chambers and local community-based organizations as a partner in helping deliver these skills was a really critical portion to making it successful and making sure we were reaching them where they were.
Yeah, and I think similarly for us, first of all, I think that's really important, right? Like we can do we can put out all the resources, as many resources as we can, but if we're not meeting the consumers, is it really helping anyone? And like my colleagues here, obviously at AT&T, we're proud to support small businesses in a big way. So we've created a bunch of online guides, toolkits, which I'll share with you all here. One of them is the AT&T Small Business Social Media Playbook, right? Just how do you go online and like how do you use social media to drive more businesses your way? And then another is Going Virtual Playbook. These are just a couple of examples that we have resources to help support small businesses. And really through these step-by-step guides, small businesses can, as I said, learn everything from how to open an e-commerce store, how to put digital marketing to work for their brand, how to manage virtual teams, that sort of stuff. And we hope that this resource remove some of the complexity and provide some small businesses with the tools that they need to drive their business through this recovery and hopefully beyond.
I want to focus in on something that Paul mentioned about silver tech. And I think all of us mentioned, just thinking back on growing up with parents who were small business owners, I can't imagine what they were going through and what my parents would have done. Like I remember, I guess it was like in the 90s during one of the recessions, like my parents had to close their store. And I can't imagine if they had to be running a restaurant during the last 18 months during COVID, like What are some of the things that you guys have seen? I know there's a lot of data and analytics, and sort of like Paul mentioned with that 60 and above age group coming in and using some of these tools. But are there any things that you guys saw that was interesting or that you'd like to share about on the analytics side, or just some of the types of businesses even that are involved now with the digital transformation?
Yeah, similarly, I remember my parents also owned a store. They owned a pharmacy. And I remember every month they bring home boxes and boxes of invoices, and every month we'd have to fill it out by hand. And that was the activity around the dinner table. And I too think that had there been any adoption of technology at the time, they would have turned to their children, and we would, whatever they adopted would be based on our limitations, not theirs. And a lot of times we see that now, that business owners are reliant on people in their lives to help them with these transitions because they've got a lot of things to do, and particularly when it comes to moments like COVID, and they have to adapt their operations. Throwing in the learning around digital skills just seems like a step too far. So, what we've seen is a lot of people turning to family members, friends, other business partners, and other people in the community to help out, which has been really inspiring, I think. And there's been a lot of efforts to help out businesses and job seekers during this time. But what we've seen is that when you survey these small businesses, and this was mentioned before, 65% of the businesses that have used the Grow with Google tools feel like it has helped them adapt and that they will continue to use these tools in the future. So again, I think that these are high barriers, they're critical barriers, but they're surmountable barriers. And once you cross it, you can have a very high success rate with people sticking with it and using these tools going forward.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think as the country recovers from this pandemic, the continued progress achieved in this digital revolution is really going to hinge on technology, right? Like on the latest technology. Like today, we're all talking about 5G and smart cities and a smart home and all of that. But it's also going to hinge on a healthy regulatory environment that encourages innovative thinking and enables small businesses to flourish. And the other piece that's important is to increase consumer trust in the digital economy services. Paul here is from PayPal. And I recently got my mom to go online and just do online banking and do online payments and all of that stuff because she didn't trust any of that technology. So trusting in that type of digital service, I think, is really important.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I think that trust barrier is something that we definitely have to overcome. And I think that can be accomplished through public-private partnerships. There's certainly an opportunity to try to get some of these tools out there and use the private sector to help to deploy some of the tremendous government relief that we've seen come out over the last year and a half. Getting back to your point about what we are seeing in terms of, what we're seeing in the data and the message that we're thinking through based on that is, I think that the most important message that we're seeing for small businesses digitizing is that it's not too late and that you're never too far behind the curve. We did some research that showed that businesses that joined the PayPal platform in the last year have actually seen double the sales of businesses that joined PayPal 2 or 3 years ago. So the businesses that are joining and coming online and adopting digital, they are basically getting up to and revving up their business to levels at a much more quick rate than we've seen in the past. And we've seen that PayPal businesses during the height of the pandemic, during Q2 and Q3 of last year, actually saw 25% year-over-year growth in that time frame, while there was a reported 9% drop in revenue for small businesses overall. Now, that being said, I think that there's still a tremendous opportunity to ramp up digital tools for small businesses even more, because even though we saw 25% growth, the e-commerce growth overall was about 40 to 50%. And a lot of that was being driven by some of the big box retailers, and which means that there's still an opportunity for some of those small businesses to really ramp up their activity online.
We talked a lot about like the changes that have happened because of COVID. Looking forward and giving the small business owners on this who are watching possibly something to think about for the future. Is there anything that you might want them to consider looking forward, changes that they might need to make or any future investments that they might want to get ready for, or something interesting that your companies are working on that would be helpful for them?
We're all working on 5G all the time. So that's our biggest thing, is just to get that technology out there, because Paul was talking about this earlier and it was funny. I remember when I first started 6 years ago, we had these iPads that we would go to community centers to teach seniors how to set up an email and how to send and receive email. We're not doing that now. It's a lot more complex now. And this is just 6 years. And I think the pandemic really accelerated this transformation. That's what we're talking about today. And so for us, I was telling the team at the beginning of the summer, this is going to be the summer of 5G, but no, it's going to be 5G all the time.
And at Google, I've been here for a little over a year and a half. And what I found is, and this is true for the whole tech sector, it just moves at a pace that is just so much faster than almost any other industry. And that's true in terms of the products, and that's true in terms of the changes, but it's also true in terms of the programming. And especially during COVID, the number of different programs that we had, offerings and educational opportunities, grant programs, all of that, it was coming out at such a rapid pace that it would be hard for anybody to keep up with. And I think it's important for people to engage with technology. Google My Business, get yourself registered, start communicating with the tools that you'll need to go forward. But then also, I think it's important for us to develop these long-term relationships through organizations like yours, through the chambers, because otherwise, I think that those organizations are able to distill and filter and communicate what's essential to the community that they're working with. And without that, I think it can feel like a flood of information and it can feel overwhelming. And so I would say it's critical for all of us to strengthen these partnerships and to figure out how to best work together so that we are communicating as essential, the information that's as essential as possible.
Yeah, really well said. I would also say something that, has been discussed a little bit, but it hasn't been discussed much today in the realm of digital transformation for small businesses is the opportunity of online small business lending. Online lenders are really becoming a great resource for small businesses that traditionally struggle to access financing from traditional financial institutions. PayPal has been offering small business working capital since 2014. We also participated heavily in SBA's Paycheck Protection Program. And as we discussed earlier, in terms of the opportunity that digital tools provide in the realm of equity and trying to solve some of those systemic issues, encouragingly, we've seen that a lot of our loans have been going to those underserved communities. Not only are they the small dollar loans, which are often really hard to access. Our average loans are in the realm of $25,000. For our PPP loans that were below $150,000, 54% went to areas that were made up of more than 25% of minority population, while only 39% of overall PPP loans went to those same zip codes. And then with our PayPal Working Capital product, we found that 39% of our loans went to low and moderate income households compared to just 22% of traditional small business loans. And we also saw that both our PPP loans and our PayPal Working Capital loans were going into zip codes that are classified as banking deserts, where we've seen bank branches close due to consolidation or bank branches just closing down since the 2008 financial crisis. I would say that is also an exciting part of the digital transformation, that opportunity to get that working capital that small businesses need.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us for this session. And hopefully it was informational and educational for everyone involved. And thanks again to Jason and Angela and Paul for joining.
Coming up soon, special remarks from the Senior Advisor to the President of the United States, Congressman Cedric Richmond.
Please welcome Tianyi Zhu, Managing Partner of Playground Capital.
Hello, my name is Tianyi Zhu. I am an entrepreneur, investor, and managing partner of Playground Capital. It is my pleasure to introduce a champion of small business and entrepreneurship. Congresswoman Michelle Steele is serving her first term representing California's 48th District. Born in South Korea and raised in Japan, Michelle immigrated to the United States to build her American dream. She is one of the first Korean American women to ever serve in Congress, so please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Michelle Steele.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Michelle Steele. It is an honor for me to join you at the National AC's AAPI Strong Legislative Conference. I want to recognize my old friend Chang and the National ACE for all their hard work, especially during the pandemic. National ACE has been a critical conduit for information and resources to the millions of AAPI business owners around the country. Even though small businesses are considered the backbone of the economy, they are slowly recovering from the economic crisis from the pandemic. My office continues to work with National ACE and the 2 million AAPI businesses that they represent to fight for lower taxes and less regulations so that these small businesses can get back on track to faster recovery. Small businesses account for 48% of all American jobs and contribute 43.5% of U.S. gross domestic product. That is why we stand with National ACE to advocate for small businesses nationwide. Thank you again for inviting me today. I look forward to us meeting in person at the next legislative update. Stay well. Thank you.
Please welcome Tammy Halevy, co-director of Reimagine Main Street.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. It is my great honor to be part of National ACE's first ever legislative conference. My name is Tammy Halevy, and I'm a senior advisor with Public-Private Strategies, and I co-lead Reimagine Main Street. Over the last year, Reimagine Main Street has worked closely with National ACE, as well as the U.S. Black Chambers and the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce to collect data and generate insights into minority business owners and how they were faring through the pandemic, what their top policy priorities are, how they think about reopening and vaccines in the workplace, and lastly, how they're rebounding and thinking about the future. I am pleased to share a few of the survey highlights from our work together. The good news is that AAPI business owners are optimistic about the future of their businesses. Almost 3 in 4, or 72%, express very strong optimism. This confidence is largely driven by the availability of vaccines. Yet, despite this confidence, AAPI business owners predict a slower recovery than other demographics. Fully 2/3, or 66% of those surveyed, anticipate it will take at least 6 months to return to their pre-pandemic revenue. AAPI women are among the most likely to expect and predict a slow recovery, with 62% of AAPI women under the age of 50 and 67% of those women over 50 predicting a long and slow recovery. Long established businesses and the hardest hit businesses are struggling to recover. 77%, more than 3 in 4 of AAPI small businesses that have been in operation for more than 10 years that are owned by AAPIs expect a long recovery. Fortunately, relief funding made a big difference, but looking ahead, capital access is likely to be a challenge for many AAPI business owners. More than 60% of the respondents who received PPP funding reported it was critical to keep their businesses afloat, but only 38% of AAPI business owners surveyed said they were confident that their businesses will be able to get the financing necessary to meet their working capital and growth needs looking ahead. Finally, we found that AAPI business owners are experiencing challenges, with only 40% agreeing that it's a good time to own a business in the US. With that, I want to thank National ACE for having me a part of their first legislative summit. I'm now very happy to pass it over to my colleague, Rhett Buttle, the founder and principal of Public-Private Strategies, to moderate this panel of experts. Rhett, over to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Tammy. I just want to take a moment to express my gratitude to the National ACE team for including both public-private strategies and the Reimagine Main Street initiative in their inaugural legislative summit. I also just want to personally thank Xiling and Daniel for their amazing leadership and their advocacy for national, Asian, and Pacific Islander businesses across the country. It's such a great honor to be here talking with a group of experts impacting the AAPI community. I'm pleased to be joined by Dennis Huang, who has been the executive director of the Asian Business Association in Los Angeles for these past 20 years. ABA-LA, as it's called, has been proactively assisting Asian American small businesses to gain access to economic opportunities and advancement since 1976. We're also joined by Myra Doria, who is the East Zone president for McDonald's USA. In her role, she leads strategy, talent, and brand development and drives long-term growth for more than 7,300 McDonald's restaurants across the United States. I want to thank you both so much for being here. With that, let's go ahead and hop into the conversation. Dennis, we heard a little bit from Tammy. The Reimagine Main Street data makes it very similar to an observation that I think we've seen in some of your research amongst your members that you did with Paul Ong, a UCLA professor who's also a professor emeritus and directs the Center for Neighborhood Knowledge. And it shows and it indicates that AAPI businesses are hesitant to take advantage of government programs that they don't believe that they're eligible or qualified for. As you know, over the last year, we've had a massive amount of government programs flowing to small businesses. And so I think it begs the question, how can local, state, and federal governments make it easier for AAPI small businesses who need help during this global pandemic?
And thank you for that. And good afternoon, everybody. I guess the short of it is, I think that funding of the research is such an important piece. Often I think we're all solution oriented, which is great, but we really don't identify the issues at need. And as you know, Asian American community are so different in terms of our ethnicity, right? We're so different in our ways. And even we have generational issues. So it's not a one size fits all. Mention about our research and what we found in our state. So we did this study for really the state of California where we are. So we found that 60% of our companies are negatively impacted compared to the entire state at 35%. So it's really affecting Asian Americans more. Third of the Asian owned businesses lost 50% of its staff, compared to only a quarter, well, it's not only, still significant, quarter for the rest of California-owned businesses. And as many people experience the hard to get access, let me do that again. Many of them had difficulty in accessing help, right? So a lot of people experience the non-responsiveness, you couldn't find counseling. Though that's available, they didn't know how to access those things. So when it comes to these studies, Asian Americans are different, right? Filipino Americans, South Asians, Cambodians, Thai, Cantonese, Vietnamese. I think a lot of times they're overlooked, but we ourselves need to do a better job of that. I think we need to look what is them and how we can help them specifically. I think the grants, like you mentioned, the PPP, and in California, we have the California Relief Grant. They're great. However, I think business need to be smarter and really try to figure out what is that innovation, what does it look like to get back to doing business again. Handouts are good, hand up would be better.
Super helpful, Dennis. I mean, I think both in the RMS data and your data, we're seeing how important it is to meet business owners where they're at and really provide these coachable tools. Myra, I wanted to bring you into the conversation next. I really want to thank you again for being with us. And I think you have this expansive purview sitting over sort of these 7,000 stores. And I think, we've seen quite a bit that diversity, equity, and inclusion are becoming so important to the role of businesses, both large and small. And so, I was curious to sort of hear a little bit from you, how businesses can not only sort of embrace, but practice this. And so could you put into context for us a little bit about how McDonald's is putting DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion into practice, how you're thinking about how that might create a pipeline for AAPI small business owners?
Yes. Hey, thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the panel. McDonald's is so committed to making diversity, equity, and inclusion synonymous with the Golden Arches. We use our influence and scale to accelerate meaningful and overdue societal change for our employees, our franchisees, suppliers, customers, and the community we serve every day. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is evident across all three legs of the stool, as we say it at McDonald's, meaning it's about our talented company employees, our brilliant owner-operators, and our valuable supplier partners. First, I want to give a little bit more clarity to that. On the company side, I myself is a testament of how we are doubling down and putting action on DEI. So let me share with you a little bit of my I story, hoping it will inspire others and many more people that it's possible to achieve their dreams to great companies such as McDonald's. So I was born and raised in the Philippines, and McDonald's was my first job in the Philippines back in 1985. I came here in the US as an immigrant, and McDonald's opened so many opportunities for me to grow and develop as a leader. I took many different roles across the US, and my family and I relocated. And I grew as a person, not just as an individual, but as a leader in the system. And one of the highlights of my career was this June of this year, when I was offered the role of East Zone President. I believe I broke the glass ceiling, or in Asia, we say the bamboo ceiling, which is more difficult to break, by the way. And I'm the first Asian employee to reach a senior vice president position in a US company like McDonald's. I am so proud to be proud of this brand, and I'm so grateful and committed in giving back and mentoring others and lift many more employees in the system, whether Asians or any other employee of minority, to be able to be successful in the McDonald's system. And then second, from an owner-operator perspective, we are creating a pipeline of creation of ownership to the franchising team and the Asian McDonald's Operator Association, or we call AMOA, most notably among of our next generation and Gen M owner-operators. We continually seek growth with owner-operators who deliver the quality experience to our customers, helping us to fulfill our mission to feed and foster communities. We have a terrific group of owner-operators in Asian descent and whom we have grown over time. And lastly, from a supplier standpoint, this past June, we announced with our largest supplier a mutual commitment to DEI by increasing purchases with certified diverse suppliers. With this mutual commitment, we are supporting and empowering diverse-owned businesses, creating new pipelines of diverse talent, and building economic growth in diverse communities. McDonald's has a long history of partnership with diverse suppliers, including a number of AAPI suppliers like the Flavor Ready Foods based in Illinois, which supplies our dip cup sauces for McNuggets and Big Mac sauces. Their CEO, Ram and Reddy, and his son, Ash, are the helms of this company. One of our operations suppliers from many of the years is Trenex, based in New Jersey. Their president and CEO, Donald Chau, supplies McDonald's with personal protective equipment for our employees. Our scale of 14,000 restaurants means that the US system spend is substantial at approximately $14 billion throughout its US supply chain in 2020, an industry leader of 23% of which are our own and diverse suppliers. So thank you for that question.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Myra, so much for sharing not only the stories of the small business owners, because I love hearing them, but also your story. I mean, it was giving me a goosebumps a little just to hear about sort of how business has been such an important role, lifting up diversity and equity and inclusion, but also your immigration story and how important that is to business. Dennis, I wanted to come back to you in the data. And Myra will come back to you as well. But the Reimagine Main Street survey that Tammy outlined early shows a strong link between optimism and the future availability for API businesses to obtain COVID relief. And I'm just wondering, like, could you tease that out for me a little bit? Do you think there's a link between the relief and the optimism? And more importantly, what do you think the data about this says to policymakers who might be listening?
First of all, mabuhay. Good job, Myra, what you did. So yes, I do think that there's some optimism, but I also feel like it's sort of a Band-Aid, right? I think it's sort of a false sense of hope. We know that the relief there was to help with the revenue gap. There's no indicator that the economy will be strong again. So I think we are advising businesses, they still need to find ways to innovate, still find ways to market their goods and services. So we want to be we want to tread carefully, but we want to, it's good to have the optimism because it's always good for business. But I do caution that.
Super helpful. Myra, I wanted to come to an issue that's been unfortunately plaguing our country, and I'm sure you're well aware, the AAPI community has been receiving just an alarming amount of physical and verbal harassment, violence, and xenophobia since March 2020. As you know, National ACE has been a leader with many important AAPI organizations in responding to this. But in some instances, AAPI businesses have changed operating procedures to keep their staff and families safe. Can you speak a little bit to the role that larger organizations such as McDonald's play in combating AAPI hate? And what are your learning lessons from that about maybe ways small businesses who are listening to today's session can leverage their roles as business owners to combat this terrible, terrible hate?
Yes, hey, thanks for the question. And, I will start with McDonald's values integrity, meaning that we do the right thing and we value our communities we serve every day. Our franchisees are the pillars of our community. McDonald's is also committed to our community partners like National ACE, our Asian McDonald's Owner-Operator Association, and the National ACE brought to our attention early on about the rise of this AAPI hate. So Joe Erlinger, our president of McDonald's USA, stood firmly with our Asian owner-operators and employees and National ACE against AAPI hate by putting out a strong public statement and donating to stop AAPI and OCA. McDonald's has long supported the AAPI community through a variety of programs, including 500,000 scholarship program for college students established in partnership with APIA Scholars and an annual education workshop series that promotes equitable education and career opportunities for our Asian American youth. Seeing an iconic company and trusted brand like McDonald's stand in the community make us feel seen and heard. I'm so proud of our Asian American franchisees for making their voice heard. Small business owners can use their powerful voices together, through which their local Chamber of Commerce and National ACE to advocate for doing the right thing. No matter what size of a business you are, we all can do better and do our part in combating this senseless hate that we experience in our community today.
Super helpful, Myra. And I've seen firsthand the role that National ACE has played at a national level, convening leaders and government officials to help them understand this issue and to talk about ways forward. Dennis, I wanted to talk a little bit about the next phase of the pandemic. As I think everyone felt like we were coming out of the pandemic and then emerging variants have started. And so, as you can imagine, a lot of small business owners out there are worried about what this means for the future of their business and how their business is going to be impacted. I'm just wondering, do you have any insights for small businesses about how they might be able to be better prepared in this moment? How should they be thinking about communicating with their staff and communities? Small business owners are such critical pillars in their communities. Many people turn to them. What are your thoughts there?
Thanks, Rhett. I think that's a very important topic you brought up, right? I think operating safely is really going to be key to ensure, especially in the retail businesses, right? But if you think more about that, I think even the service-based organizations have to really rethink how they operate and how they conduct business. Kind of think about how we're going to do these meetings. Is Zoom the optimal way? I think people still needs to be kind of in front of each other. I think we got to figure out how to open safely. I mean, think of even the simple, let's say having a lunch meeting, right? We're there together. How do you do that safely? So I think really got to rethink what is some of that protocol and how we do it. I know especially in the Chinese community when they're sharing the food, I think as maybe you can do that with family, but maybe we shouldn't do that anymore as eating with somebody else in a business setting. Or there are definitely ways of using it. There's a share spoon or a share chopsticks that you kind of use without having that contact. And I think those are things that they think business need to kind of think about when they're going to these meetings. I know handshake is important. That's sort of the Western culture, or now it's kind of changing to fist bumps. What I am bringing in is the Asian bow. I think to show the sign of respect, we just do the bow, right? We don't need to touch each other. We're good and still can communicate and do well. But I think that's such an important topic, and I appreciate you bringing that up, Rhett.
Myra, I wanted to wrap up with one last question to you before talking about some resources. I think, throughout today's session, we've learned a lot about different trends that are happening in the AAPI small business community and other ways to combat the terrible hate we're seeing. I did want to talk a little bit about, what you think the post-COVID economy might look like. We've seen in some of the research that we've done at Reimagine Main Street that vaccines are fueling optimism, but also we know new variants and challenges are coming. And so we'd just love some of that sort of from where you sit, thoughtful insight about what does this future potentially look like?
Yeah, on that topic, McDonald's leads with science and safety at the forefront of our employees and our customers, right? As a trusted brand that our people can count on and our consumers can count on each and every day. We partner with our owner operators and we work together to keep our dining rooms open and our drive-thrus open by partnering with the Mayo Clinic. Our national recovery team, made up of owner operators and company employees, consulting with the Mayo Clinic on safety protocols for our restaurant employees and our customers. And this led to McDonald's being one of the first to implement safety standards such as masks, gloves, the plexiglass dividers, and many more safety standards. These measures have evolved over time, but the key point is following the science of trusted third-party experts help us to continue serving our customers and keeping our people safe. As it relates to vaccine, as your survey results demonstrate, the availability and access of vaccine drives AAPI small business confidence. An example of this is one of our AAPI franchisee in the Sacramento, California area. So his name is Harris Liu, who partnered with the California Department of Public Health to hold vaccine clinics at his McDonald's location. Free vaccines and of course a free menu item. There were 70 plus locations across Northern California offering these free clinics for our employees. Another one is one of our AAPI employee, Dino Samaki, who rolled out a voluntary vaccine pay program that paid his employees to get vaccinated and held education sessions to address any ongoing questions and concern around vaccine. Nationally, McDonald's partner with the White House to promote vaccines and vaccine confidence with our campaign called We Can Do This. And they are in our coffee cups. Our people could get more information from vaccine.gov, which has printed over 50 million of these cups nationwide. So we use this kind of campaign in our power to make sure we tackle these big challenges facing our communities today. So thank you.
Yeah, and I think to defeat this and move forward, we're going to need everyone, large businesses and small business. And so it's inspiring to hear what McDonald's is doing. And I love the story of the franchisee in Sacramento because small business owners are leaders in their community. And I know National ACE, through their work with Reimagine Main Street, has been playing an incredible role in trying to help businesses figure out how they can play a role. And with that, I just want to thank everyone. That's all the time that we have today. It's been amazing to be a part of this conversation. National ACE has done a fantastic job bringing together an amazing conference that will be available to you all week. They've been able to bring together leaders from the federal government, including members of the president's cabinet. They're also going to bring together for you to hear from U.S. members of Congress, business leaders, small business leaders, large companies, and affiliate organizations. If you want to learn more about some of the data we discussed today, we would suggest you check out Nielsen and the Reimagine Main Street website. You can visit nielsen.com. If you look at Hope in Action, growing the influence of Asian Americans, they have an amazing report there. The Reimagine Main Street is reimaginemainstreet.org. And of course, you can always get amazing tools and information on the National ACE website. With that, I want to thank Myra and Dennis. I want to thank the whole National ACE team. Thank you so much for joining us for this session, and we'll see you soon.
I am deeply honored to introduce the final speaker of our conference. Congressman Cedric Richmond previously served for 10 years as member of Congress from Louisiana and also chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus from 2017 to 2019. Congressman Richmond was one of President Biden's earliest choices to join his administration. He now serves as the senior advisor to the president and the director of the White House Office of Public Engagement, which is responsible for creating and coordinating direct dialogue between the Biden-Harris administration and the diverse American public. In this role, Congressman Richmond works to ensure that community leaders, diverse perspectives, and new voices all have the opportunity to inform the work of the president. He also has a direct hand in building and maintaining the transparent, responsible, and accountable government President Biden and Vice President Harris have promised. National ACE has met with Congressman Richmond a number of times, and we could not be more pleased that he is joining us again today to further the White House's conversation with you, the AAPI community, whose future success is inseparable from our country's economic recovery. Please join me in welcoming the final speaker of our 2021 AAPI Strong Legislative Conference, Congressman Cedric Richmond.
Hello to National ACE and all of the attendees of this year's inaugural Legislative Summit. Thank you for welcoming me here today. I'm Cedric Richmond, Senior Advisor to the President of the United States and Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement. I hope you all had a wonderful legislative conference, that you learned a lot and are leaving inspired to get out there and make some change. I want to acknowledge the tremendous work of National ACE's President and CEO, Chi-Ling Tong, and all of her staff for putting this legislative summit together, which is just the latest in their tireless efforts to uplift and support Asian American and Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander small businesses and the community at large. The past 2 years have not been easy on AA and NHPI businesses, communities, and families. And that is what makes this inaugural Legislative Summit's theme of AAPI Strong so appropriate and inspirational. Through the pandemic, we have seen small business owners be resilient, finding new and creative ways to do their business, innovating, not just to stay afloat, but to fill new and urgent needs. As you know, since day one in office, President Biden has made racial equity a focus, and he is committed to helping small businesses in every community across America access the tools and resources they need to stay open, rehire, and rebuild. In fact, to date, the Biden-Harris administration has delivered more than $300 billion in relief to Main Street and is on track to fully forgive more than 6 million small business loans by year's end. President Biden is also committed to addressing the needs of the AA and NHPI community, prioritizing an all-administration approach to combating the rise in anti-Asian hate. From the historic appointment of Erica Mortsugu, who spoke earlier in the conference, to the reestablished White House initiative on Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islanders, led by Crystal Kai. We've made a lot of headway in the last 9 months. And my team, the White House Office of Public Engagement, continues to work closely with both Erica and Crystal on these efforts, including on a recent roundtable with the President and Vice President featuring AA and NHPI leaders. By passing the American Rescue Plan, our administration was able to address the immediate crises facing our nation's small businesses by dedicating $50 billion to support the hardest hit small businesses after the expiration of the Paycheck Protection Program. To ensure small businesses are able to gain access to these important federal programs, the American Rescue Plan also invests $175 million to bring community organizations in to serve as navigators and to establish a hotline to help small business owners through the process of application. When the president committed to building back better, protecting small and local businesses like yours was his top priority, because diversity and American innovation are our foundation and our future. This is the core tenet of the president's Build Back Better agenda, as it reflects a core belief that motivated President Biden to run for president, that we owe working people in this country a fair shot, that we have to prepare them to compete, and that we owe them a level playing field on which to do it. Thank you for having me speak with you all today, and congratulations on a great legislative summit. Please stay safe and be well.
Please welcome National ACE Board Chair Dr. Karen Eng and Ms. Chaleng Tong, President and CEO of National ACE.
What an informative discussion and a wonderful way to close our 3-day conference today. Karen, Susan, and Bill, thank you so much for hosting the past 3 days. As our community and economic strength continue to flourish, we hope to accomplish even more through meaningful input, cooperation, collaboration, and active support for our leaders like you, the audience both in the private and public sector. We really appreciate leaders who have stepped up to address inequalities in the communities. We need to band together to help small businesses and speak out about discrimination, hate, and violence.
The beauty of America is that anybody has a chance. Asian Americans are just as much American as everyone else who lives in this country. As the fastest growing ethnic community in the United States, we are confident that our contributions will continue to grow in the years to come. Again, we cannot do this without the support of our board of directors, corporate sponsors, our affiliate chambers and partners, and finally, the National ACE team. Please visit our websites, nationalace.org and AAPIstrong.com for more information on upcoming programming and opportunities. Together, we are AAPI Strong.